Just the other day I was browsing on Etsy looking for some inspiration for a new project when I came across this. So this is a laser cut photo album, and I think this is a really cool project by itself, but that is when I had a little bit of a crazy idea. I thought to myself, what if I actually did this entire thing without a printer or a single drop of ink? In other words, what if I actually did the photo engravings themselves with my laser directly on the pages of the photo album? Having done a decent bit of photo engraving in the past, my theory is that by burning the photos directly into the paper with my laser, this could create a really unique sort of old-timey storybook vibe that you just don't get with a normal ink photo. And if my idea for this comes together at all, then this look will be helped by this unique sort of driftwood looking oak material that I have here, and due to the fact that I'm going to be binding it manually, hopefully anyway, I've never done this before, but binding it manually with some leather. But before we jump into the actual build, you might wonder what would possess somebody to go through this amount of effort, given that it is much easier and way faster to just print out the photos and stick them on there like you would normally for this type of project. Well, my 5-year anniversary is coming up, and my wife, in addition to being an incredible woman who I'm really grateful to be married to, is also the person who originally got us into laser engraving. And so I thought, how appropriate would it be for me to make her something special on our laser engraver for this anniversary? So that's a big idea, but I've never done photo engravings on something as thin as paper before, and I'm also not sure how the binding process is gonna go because I've never done bindings with like leather and all of that. So we've got a lot of stuff to figure out. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I did was get my piece of paper ready on my working area, and I set my fire extinguisher by the side because I wasn't sure how this would go on paper. I ran my material test, but it really didn't come out quite the way that I wanted, and so I ended up running it a couple more times until finally I found a good result that was dark enough and that I liked without going through the paper. And then I did 4 more tests, including an interval test, a dot width correction test, an image mode test, and then finally an adjust image settings test to make sure I had everything dialed in. Then I ran one final test to combine all the settings from the previous tests. Wow, come on, you gotta admit that that's cool. All right, I'm excited about this now. I'm gonna take these settings and apply it to my next images. With everything looking good, I went ahead and started the first full photo engraving, but that's when I discovered a pretty significant problem, or should I say a pretty long problem. It was saying this photo engraving was going to take over 1 hour and 15 minutes. So then I had to remind myself, okay, just one problem at a time. Let's just make sure that the first photo actually turns out well, and then we can figure out the time thing later. Luckily, the photo did turn out really well, and it even had a bit of that storybook vibe that I was going for. So then I started the next photo, and I also put some more thought into how many of these I should actually make, given that each photo is gonna take like 1 hour to engrave. And as much as I love the idea of doing a grand romantic gesture and doing 100 different photo engravings, I don't have 100 hours to spend on this, and so I thought, why don't I just start with 5 since it's our 5-year anniversary and we can always add more later. Now that the final photo engraving is finished, it's time to get started on the photo album, which is really gonna bring all of this together. And as a reminder, I'm looking to make a photo album that looks kind of like this one, but for mine, I wanna have a cutout in the front such that you can see through it to see the first photo on the inside, sort of like this different version you see here. But for mine, I don't wanna use a heart. Instead, I wanna use something a little bit more fun, like an oak leaf. And so I went out into the backyard and picked up a bunch of different oak leaves, picked one out, took a photo of it, and then I traced it in Lightburn to get this outline. Now, the significance of the oak leaf is that this is actually the first house we bought together, and I thought that my wife would really like a nature theme. And so I did a little bit of design work here, and I'm really not a designer, which is why I'm tracing this in the first place. And then I did some measurements and got everything set up so that I would have the front panel here and the text, and then the process of making the back was really the easy part. I just had to make a copy of the outline of the front, and there it was. And to wrap up the design process, I went ahead and set up my layers, and I did have to run some material tests for this because I've actually never worked with this exact material before, but then I punched in those settings and my Lightburn file was ready to go. So then I went ahead and ran the front of the photo album on my laser, but I gotta tell you, this is the most nervous that I've been since we did that very first photo, because this front of the photo album is really going to shape the overall first impression of this project. And so if this doesn't go well, we'll be in a little bit of a situation. All right, moment of truth here. Let's see how it turned out. That leaf looks bigger than I thought it would. Okay, looks like our cuts came out okay. So these are the 2 pieces here, if you can see those. And the only thing I'm a little bit concerned about, just taking a first look at this here, is the engraving looks a little bit messy. So I'm gonna see if I wipe this off with a little bit of rubbing alcohol if that'll clean that look up a little bit. But otherwise, I really like how this leaf looks. That looks even better than I was expecting. So it's a good start. Okay, that really did the trick. There was just some dust on the side from the engraving, but now that I've wiped it down with that rubbing alcohol, it looks really good. So this is gonna do it. Now for another little moment of truth here, let's see if our cutout lines up with the photo. Oh my gosh, you guys. Okay, yep, that looks fantastic. I'm really happy with that, how that came out. Okay, let's keep moving. This is great. I'm excited. Let's keep moving. So now I just had to cut out the back, which I already did here, so that's done. But now that means it's time to move on to the part that I've been kind of dreading, which is the binding process. So let's see if we can figure this out. I began by marking the leather where I wanted the holes, but since I don't have any leather working tools, I actually used a 3-hole punch to put the holes in the leather itself. And it actually worked pretty good, surprisingly. And then I just had to line things up, make sure that the wood holes was matching with the leather holes. And then I had to get ready for making my cuts. Again, I don't have any leather cutting tools, so I actually used several passes on a paper cutter that I have, which is not ideal, but it did get the job done. And in hindsight, I probably should have done all of this on my laser, but I wasn't really sure if the leather that I had on hand was actually laser safe, and so I was just trying to be a little bit cautious and using hand cutting tools instead. But anyway, if you are wondering about the mechanics of my design here, basically the way I worked this out was on the right-hand side, I'm just binding the leather to the wood-looking material itself, but on the left-hand side, it's going to be connecting all of the layers together. So that's gonna be what actually holds everything and be the real binding, and then the right-hand side is just the flaps that will move more freely. And so that's basically how this is going to work, and you can kind of see the bend there as I put these final screws in. And there you have it. That's what it looks like, and I don't know, you might be way better at this stuff than me, but I think this turned out really nice, so I'm excited to give it to my wife.